The final costume. The town of Eldridge was nestled between rolling hills and dense, whispering forests. Every year, as the leaves turned golden and the air grew crisp, Eldridge transformed into the very embodiment of Halloween. Streets were lined with carved pumpkins, their faces ranging from the comically grotesque to the eerily serene. Cobwebs adorned every possible corner, and skeletons danced in the wind from the porches of old Victorian houses. The townsfolk of Eldridge took Halloween seriously. It wasn't just about the candy or the playful scares, it was a tradition, a time when the community came together to celebrate the thinning of the veil between the living and the dead. Children would spend weeks planning their costumes, aiming to outdo their efforts from the previous year, while adults would throw elaborate themed parties. This year, the excitement was palpable. Word had spread that a new costume shop had opened downtown, just in time for the festivities. Mystique Masquerades, read the ornate sign, its letters shimmering in gold against a backdrop of deep purple. The shop's windows were dark, save for a single spotlight that illuminated a mannequin dressed in a stunningly detailed raven costume, its feathers glistening as if they were real. Whispers filled the air as townsfolk speculated about the shop's origins. Some said it was owned by a famous Hollywood costume designer, while others believed it was the project of a reclusive millionaire with a penchant for the theatrical. But amidst the rumors, one thing was certain: Eldridge was in for its most unforgettable Halloween yet. Mystique Masquerades stood out like an enigma amidst the familiar storefronts of Eldridge. Housed in a building that no one remembered seeing before, its architecture was a blend of Gothic and Victorian, with tall spires and intricate ironwork. The facade was painted a deep shade of midnight blue, making it seem as if the building had been carved out of the night itself. The shop's windows were vast and arched, framed by heavy velvet drapes in deep purples and blacks. Each window showcased a single costume, displayed on a mannequin, and each was lit by its own spotlight. The costumes were breathtaking in their detail: a mermaid with shimmering scales, a warrior with authentic-looking armor, a fairy with wings that seemed to flutter ever so slightly. It was clear that these weren't your average store-bought costumes, they were masterpieces. The entrance was an ornate wooden door, with a brass handle shaped like a masquerade mask. Above the door, the shop's name, Mystique Masquerades, was written in elegant gold script, which seemed to glow faintly, beckoning potential customers inside. As one approached the shop, a subtle scent wafted out, a mix of aged leather, fresh parchment, and a hint of something mystical, like a potion brewing. Soft, haunting melodies played from somewhere within, adding to the shop's allure. The townsfolk were both enchanted and slightly uneasy. While many were drawn to its beauty and the promise of the perfect Halloween costume, others felt a prickling sensation at the back of their necks, a whisper of a warning that perhaps some mysteries are best left unsolved. Alex was a lanky teenager, standing at an awkward height that he hadn't quite grown into. His mop of curly brown hair often fell into his hazel eyes, which always seemed to be observing, always curious. He had a penchant for the mysterious, often losing himself in books about the supernatural, unsolved mysteries, and ancient legends. His friends often joked that he was born in the wrong era, more suited for candlelit seances than modern-day video games. In Eldridge, Alex was known for his unique Halloween costumes. Last year, he had turned heads as a steampunk explorer, complete with a handcrafted leather backpack filled with antique tools and maps. The year before, he was a shadow, cloaked in a costume that seemed to absorb light, making him nearly invisible in the dark. This year, Alex was determined to outdo himself. He wanted a costume that wasn't just a costume but a transformation. He had sketched ideas, scoured online forums, and even tried his hand at sewing, but nothing felt right. It was during one of his brainstorming sessions that he overheard whispers about Mystique Masquerades and its otherworldly collection. Intrigued and hopeful, Alex decided to visit the shop. As he approached its entrance, he felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. Little did he know that this Halloween, he wouldn't just be wearing a costume, he'd be living it. As Alex stepped into Mystique Masquerades, a chill ran down his spine, not from fear but from sheer awe. The interior of the shop was dimly lit, with soft amber lights casting a warm glow on the walls, which were lined with costumes. Each outfit was displayed on its own pedestal, like artifacts in a museum, and the attention to detail was staggering. The first costume that caught Alex's eye was that of a dragon. It wasn't just a simple suit, it had iridescent scales that shimmered in the light, wings that looked powerful enough for flight, and a tail that swayed with a life of its own. Next to it was the attire of a celestial being, with a gown that seemed to be woven from starlight and a halo that genuinely floated. As he moved through the shop, Alex felt as though he was journeying through different realms and eras. Here was the armor of a gladiator, complete with battle scars. There, the robes of a sorcerer, pulsating with an unseen energy. He even came across a ghost costume that seemed to fade in and out of existence. But it wasn't just the visual realism that fascinated Alex, it was the aura each costume exuded. The air around the werewolf outfit felt colder, and he could swear he heard distant howls. The witch's garb seemed to be surrounded by whispers of incantations, and the scent of herbs and potions lingered. Alex was spellbound. He reached out to touch a pirate's coat, and the texture was uncannily authentic, from the roughness of the weather-beaten fabric to the cold metal of the ornate buttons. It was as if the shop had captured the very essence of each character, bottling up their spirits and stories within the costumes. Lost in wonder, Alex realized that Mystique Masquerades wasn't just selling outfits, it was offering gateways to other lives, other worlds. The possibilities were endless, and the thought of becoming someone, or something, else for a night was intoxicating. The challenge now was choosing just one. Among the myriad of costumes, one in particular beckoned to Alex. Positioned on a raised platform, illuminated by a solitary spotlight, was the attire of a medieval knight. The armor was a polished silver, reflecting the soft lights of the shop in a mesmerizing dance. Intricate engravings adorned the breastplate, depicting dragons, castles, and scenes of epic battles. The chainmail beneath shimmered, each link meticulously crafted. A crimson cloak flowed from the shoulders, and beside the armor stood a helmet with a visor sculpted to resemble a fierce, noble face. Alex had always been captivated by tales of chivalry, of brave knights venturing on quests, facing dragons, and rescuing damsels in distress. The idea of honor, loyalty, and bravery resonated with him. As he approached the knight's costume, he could almost hear the distant clanging of swords and the thundering of hooves. The scent of cold steel and leather filled his nostrils. With a mixture of reverence and excitement, Alex reached out, letting his fingers glide over the cool metal. The craftsmanship was impeccable, it felt as if this armor had seen real battles, had been worn by a true knight of old. A voice, soft and alluring, broke his trance. "Would you like to try it on?" Mrs. Lavinia, the shopkeeper, stood behind him, her eyes twinkling with a knowing smile. Alex hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I think I would." Mrs. Lavinia led him to a spacious changing room, its walls lined with ornate mirrors. As Alex donned the armor, he was surprised by its weight, it felt substantial yet not restrictive. The chainmail was tailored perfectly, and the breastplate seemed to mold to his form. As he fastened the cloak and placed the helmet on his head, a transformation began. Looking in the mirror, Alex no longer saw a modern-day teenager. Staring back at him was a knight, proud and formidable. He felt a surge of confidence, a sense of purpose. The weight of the armor was no longer just physical, it carried with it the responsibility of the knight's code. Lost in the reflection, Alex barely noticed Mrs. Lavinia's voice. "Remember, every costume has a story, and with it, a past. Choose wisely." But Alex was already entranced, ready to embark on a quest, to live the legend of the knight. Little did he know that this decision would set him on a journey beyond his wildest imagination. As Alex admired his reflection, a strange sensation began to wash over him. The coolness of the armor seemed to seep into his very bones, and the weight he felt was no longer just of metal and chainmail, but of history, of countless battles fought and won. The dim lighting of the changing room began to flicker, casting eerie shadows that danced and swirled around him. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled, and the walls of the changing room seemed to stretch and warp. The mirrors reflected not the interior of Mystique Masquerades, but vast, open fields under a setting sun, the distant sounds of clashing swords and battle cries echoing in his ears. Alex's heart raced as the transformation took hold. His mind was flooded with memories that weren't his own, charging into battle atop a mighty steed, the thrill of hand-to-hand combat, the weight of responsibility as he led troops into war. He remembered the feeling of cold steel in his hand, the art of the swordplay, the strategies of medieval warfare. He recalled nights spent around campfires, listening to minstrels and sharing tales of bravery. He felt the camaraderie of his fellow knights, the bond forged in the heat of battle. The memories were vivid, almost overpowering. Alex could feel the adrenaline of combat, the pain of wounds sustained, the pride of victory. He remembered the code of chivalry, the vows he had taken to protect the weak and uphold justice. He felt a deep sense of honor, a duty to serve. As quickly as it began, the transformation subsided. The changing room of Mystique Masquerades came back into focus, the sounds of battle fading into silence. But Alex was changed. He was no longer just a teenager in a costume, he was Sir Alexander of Eldridge, a knight with the skills and memories of a bygone era. He removed the helmet, his breathing heavy, trying to comprehend what had just occurred. The line between reality and fantasy had blurred, and Alex was left to grapple with the implications. He had wanted a costume that was transformative, but he hadn't anticipated becoming the very character he portrayed. Outside the changing room, Mrs. Lavinia waited patiently, her expression inscrutable. "I see you've experienced the magic of the costume," she remarked, her voice tinged with a hint of amusement and warning. "Remember, every choice has its consequences." Alex, still reeling from the transformation, nodded slowly, realizing that this Halloween would be unlike any other. The adventure had only just begun. The weight of the memories and emotions from the transformation pressed heavily on Alex's mind. The vividness of the battles, the faces of comrades long gone, the very essence of a life lived centuries ago, it was all too much to bear. He felt trapped, caught between two worlds, two identities. His hands trembled as he touched the cool metal of the armor. The sensation was disorienting. Was he Alex, the teenager from Eldridge, or was he Sir Alexander, the knight with a legacy of valor? The boundaries of his identity seemed to blur, and panic began to set in. He rushed to remove the armor, each piece clattering to the floor with a resounding echo. But with every piece he shed, the memories clung tighter, like a second skin. The scent of burning torches, the taste of stale bread from long campaigns, the sting of old wounds, they all lingered. His breathing became rapid, shallow. The walls of the changing room seemed to close in on him. The dim lighting grew darker, and the shadows more menacing. He felt trapped, caged by a past that wasn't truly his. "Think, Alex, think," he muttered to himself, his voice sounding distant and unfamiliar. He tried to recall memories of his own life, his family, his friends, the simple joys of modern-day Eldridge. But the memories were fleeting, overshadowed by the knight's legacy. Desperation took hold. He pounded on the changing room door, calling out for help. "Mrs. Lavinia. Please. I need to get out of this. I need to go back." The door creaked open slowly, revealing the enigmatic shopkeeper. Her eyes, once twinkling with mischief, now held a depth of understanding and sympathy. "Ah, young one," she murmured, "the magic of the costumes is powerful, but it is not without its challenges." Alex, on the verge of tears, pleaded, "I just wanted a costume, not a new life. How do I go back? How do I become me again?" Mrs. Lavinia reached out, her touch gentle, guiding him to a plush chair. "Sit," she instructed. "Finding your way back requires clarity of mind and heart. You must anchor yourself to your true self, to the life you know and cherish." As Alex closed his eyes, Trying to find that anchor, he realized that the journey back to himself would be as challenging as any quest the knight had ever undertaken. Mrs. Lavinia was a figure of intrigue in Eldridge, especially since no one could recall when she had arrived or when Mystique Masquerades had even been established. She was an elderly woman, with a stature that was both commanding and graceful. Her silver hair cascaded down her back in thick waves, held in place by an ornate comb that looked like it belonged in another era. Her eyes were the most captivating feature, a deep shade of violet that seemed to hold centuries of secrets. She always dressed in flowing gowns of deep purples and blues, adorned with intricate lace and embroidery. Around her neck, she wore a pendant, a silver locket that she would often touch, as if drawing strength or solace from it. Despite her age, there was an energy about her, a vibrancy that was both magnetic and slightly unnerving. She moved with a fluidity that belied her years, and her voice, though soft, carried an authority that demanded respect. When customers entered Mystique Masquerades, they were often greeted by her enigmatic smile, as if she knew something they didn't. And as Alex would soon discover, she indeed did. "Ah, young Alex," she began, her voice a melodic blend of warmth and caution. "You've experienced the magic of my costumes. They are not mere fabric and thread. They are imbued with the essence of the characters they represent. To wear one is to become one." Alex, still reeling from his transformation, looked at her with wide eyes. "Why? Why would you create something like this?" Mrs. Lavinia sighed, her gaze drifting to the distant past. "Long ago, I was a seamstress in a kingdom far from here. I crafted outfits for royalty, for celebrations, for ceremonies. But I wanted to create something more, something that would allow the wearer to truly embody the character, to experience another life. With ancient magic and years of dedication, I succeeded." She paused, her eyes meeting Alex's. "But with great power comes great responsibility. The costumes are not toys, they are gateways. And once you step through, it's not always easy to find your way back." Alex swallowed hard, realizing the gravity of his situation. Mrs. Lavinia, sensing his fear, added, "But fear not, for every journey has a path home. And I am here to guide those who lose their way." Word about Mystique Masquerades spread like wildfire throughout Eldridge. The townsfolk were abuzz with excitement about the new shop with its breathtakingly realistic costumes. And as Halloween approached, more and more residents flocked to Mrs. Lavinia's store, eager to find the perfect outfit for the town's annual festivities. Sarah, the local librarian, chose a siren costume. The gown was a mesmerizing blend of blues and greens, with shimmering scales and a diaphanous veil that looked like it was crafted from sea foam. When she wore it, she felt an irresistible urge to sing. Her voice, usually soft and reserved, became hauntingly beautiful, echoing with the melancholy of the deep sea. And as she sang, those who heard her felt an inexplicable pull, drawn to her as sailors once were to the mythical sirens. Tom, the town's mechanic, was drawn to a gladiator outfit. The armor was heavy, with a worn leather cuirass and a helmet adorned with a red plume. Once he donned it, Tom's usually jovial demeanor shifted. He became more assertive, his posture more imposing. He felt the weight of the Colosseum sands beneath his feet, heard the roar of the crowd, and felt an insatiable desire for combat. The local gym became his arena, where he challenged anyone willing to a friendly wrestling match, showcasing skills no one knew he possessed. Little Emily, a sweet girl of 8, chose a fairy princess costume. It was delicate, with wings that sparkled and a tiara made of what looked like real moonstones. The moment she wore it, she began to flit around, leaving a trail of glittering dust in her wake. She spoke in rhymes and sang songs of enchanted forests and magical creatures. Birds and butterflies seemed drawn to her, and flowers would bloom out of season wherever she went. The transformations were not limited to these few. The baker became a pirate, the school principal a pharaoh, and the town's mayor a dashing musketeer. Each transformation was more astonishing than the last. Eldridge was no longer just a town, it was a tapestry of stories and eras, all interwoven in a dance of magic and mystery. At first, the townsfolk reveled in their new personas. It was a novelty, a game. But as the days passed, the lines between reality and fantasy began to blur. The transformed individuals started to forget their real lives, becoming more and more engrossed in their characters. The siren's song lured travelers off their path, the gladiators' challenges became more aggressive, and the fairies' enchantments affected the town's flora and fauna in unpredictable ways. Eldridge was in chaos, and as Halloween night approached, the transformations became more pronounced, the magic of the costumes more potent. The town was on the brink of losing its identity, and it was up to Alex, with the guidance of Mrs. Lavinia, to find a way to break the spell and return Eldridge to its former self. Eldridge, once a quaint and peaceful town, was now a whirlwind of chaos and fantasy. Every corner seemed to hold a new surprise, a new story unfolding in real time. The town square, usually a place for community gatherings and weekend markets, had transformed into a battleground of eras and myths. Pirates, with their swashbuckling swords and boisterous shouts, roamed the streets, challenging anyone they met to duels for their treasure. They commandeered the local pond, turning paddle boats into pirate ships, their Jolly Roger flags waving proudly. Witches took to the skies, their cackles echoing through the night. They set up shop in the park, brewing potions in large cauldrons. A greenish mist enveloped the area, and townsfolk who ventured too close found themselves transformed into frogs, birds, or even inanimate objects. Astronauts, in their shiny silver suits, explored Eldridge as if it were an alien planet. They set up base camps in backyards, planting flags and collecting samples, much to the bewilderment of the homeowners. Their radios crackled with communication, and they seemed genuinely puzzled by the earthly customs they encountered. Medieval knights jousted in the streets, their armored horses clashing in dramatic displays of skill and bravery. The clang of their lances and the cheers of their supporters filled the air. Vampires and werewolves, once enemies in lore, now roamed side by side. They turned the local diner into a gothic haunt, serving blood milkshakes and moonlit burgers. Fairies and sprites danced around the lampposts, their glow illuminating the night. They played pranks on the townsfolk, hiding belongings and sprinkling glitter everywhere. Mummies from ancient Egypt wandered aimlessly, their bandaged forms creating a stark contrast against the modern backdrop of Eldridge. They seemed drawn to the museum, where they gazed longingly at the exhibits, perhaps reminiscing about their past. The town's infrastructure struggled to cope with the sudden influx of characters. Traffic lights malfunctioned as wizards tried to improve them with spells. The post office was overrun by owls, delivering letters and parcels. The local radio station played a bizarre mix of sea shanties, space transmissions, and medieval ballads. Children, initially thrilled by the magical transformation of their town, now clung to their parents, overwhelmed by the unpredictability of the situation. Pets, too, were affected, with dogs howling in confusion and cats arching their backs at the unfamiliar creatures. The once tight-knit community of Eldridge was now a cacophony of clashing worlds and stories. Every individual, lost in their character, added to the mayhem, making it nearly impossible to discern reality from fantasy. The town was on the brink of pandemonium, and a solution was desperately needed to restore order to the chaos. Even as Sir Alexander, with the memories and skills of a medieval knight, Alex's core essence remained. Deep down, he was still the teenager who loved his town and its people. The chaos and confusion in Eldridge weighed heavily on his heart, and he knew he had to do something. The knight's code of chivalry, which now coursed through his veins, spoke of honor, bravery, and the duty to protect the weak. Alex felt a burning responsibility to uphold these values, not just as Sir Alexander, but as himself. The town was in peril, and he was determined to be its savior. Drawing from the knight's memories, Alex remembered tales of powerful sorcerers and enchanted artifacts that could break spells and curses. He wondered if there was something within Mystique Masquerades that could reverse the transformations. With this thought, he made his way to the shop, his armor clinking with each determined step. As he approached, he noticed that the shop itself seemed untouched by the chaos outside. The atmosphere was calm, almost serene. Mrs. Lavinia was at the counter, her violet eyes watching him intently. "I need to find a way to reverse this," Alex declared, his voice echoing with the knight's authority. "Eldridge is in chaos, and I must set things right." Mrs. Lavinia nodded slowly. "The power of the costumes is ancient and strong. But every magic has its counter. To reverse the transformations, you must find the heart of Eldridge." "The heart of Eldridge?" Alex echoed, puzzled. "It's not a physical heart," she explained. "It's the essence, the spirit of this town. Every place has one. It's what binds the community together, what gives it life and identity. You must find it and use its power to break the spell." With a newfound purpose, Alex set out on his quest. He visited the town's landmarks, spoke to its oldest residents, and delved into its history. Along the way, he encountered challenges, duels with pirates, riddles from witches, and tests of courage. But with each obstacle, his determination only grew stronger. As days turned into nights, Alex began to piece together the clues. He realized that the heart of Eldridge wasn't a tangible object but a moment when the entire community came together, united in purpose and spirit. It was the annual Halloween festival, a tradition that celebrated the town's unity and joy. With this revelation, Alex rallied the transformed townsfolk. Together, they organized a grand festival, even amidst the chaos. As the celebrations began, the spirit of unity and love permeated the air. The heart of Eldridge was alive and beating. And then, as if by magic, the transformations began to reverse. One by one, the townsfolk returned to their true selves, their memories of their alternate personas fading like a dream. Eldridge was restored, and while the townsfolk would always remember that fateful Halloween, they also remembered the bravery of a young knight named Alex, who reminded them of the true heart of their community. As Alex delved deeper into the mysteries of the heart of Eldridge, he crossed paths with Sarah, a girl he vaguely recognized from school. Sarah, usually a quiet and reserved individual, had been transformed into a powerful sorceress. Her once plain attire was now replaced with flowing robes of deep emerald, adorned with golden patterns that shimmered in the dim light. A silver tiara rested on her brow, and her eyes glowed with an ethereal light. Sarah, or the sorceress she had become, was initially wary of the knightly figure of Alex. But as they spoke, they realized they shared a common goal: to restore Eldridge to its former state. Sarah's transformation had granted her access to ancient spells and knowledge, and she believed that together, they could harness the magic needed to counteract the costume's enchantments. The two formed an unlikely alliance. Alex, with his knight's determination and bravery, and Sarah, with her newfound magical abilities, began to work together. Sarah taught Alex about the arcane arts, revealing spells and rituals that could aid their quest. In return, Alex shared tales of chivalry and honor, reminding Sarah of the importance of their mission. As they journeyed through Eldridge, they faced numerous challenges. At one point, they were trapped in a labyrinth created by a mischievous fairy, where every turn led to more confusion. Using Sarah's magic and Alex's strategic mind, they managed to find their way out. In another instance, they encountered a group of transformed townsfolk who, under the influence of their characters, saw Sarah and Alex as threats. A tense standoff ensued, with Sarah conjuring protective barriers and Alex readying his sword. But instead of resorting to violence, the duo used persuasion and reason, reminding the townsfolk of their true selves and the love they held for Eldridge. As the days passed, the bond between Alex and Sarah grew stronger. They confided in each other, sharing their fears, hopes, and dreams. Sarah spoke of her life before the transformation, of her love for books and her dream of becoming a writer. Alex, in turn, shared his aspirations and the weight of responsibility he felt as both a knight and a teenager. Their partnership proved invaluable. Sarah's magic, combined with Alex's determination, brought them closer to the heart of Eldridge. And as the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, they realized that their combined strengths were the key to saving their town. The subplot of Alex and Sarah added depth to the story, showcasing the power of teamwork, friendship, and the unexpected connections that can form in the face of adversity. Mrs. Lavinia, with her centuries of wisdom and knowledge, knew that simply wanting to reverse the curse wouldn't be enough. True magic, the kind that could undo such powerful enchantments, required more than just spells and incantations. It required courage, determination, and a test of one's character. As Alex and Sarah approached her, seeking guidance, Mrs. Lavinia's violet eyes seemed to pierce into their very souls. To reverse the transformations and restore Eldridge, she began in her melodic voice, "You must retrieve the amulet of Aetheria. It's an ancient artifact, imbued with the power to counteract the strongest of magics." Sarah, with her newfound knowledge of the arcane, had heard whispers of the amulet in her spells. "The amulet of Aetheria," she murmured, "it's said to be lost, hidden away in the heart of the cursed woods." Mrs. Lavinia nodded. The cursed woods, also known as the haunted forest, is a place where time stands still, and reality blurs with illusion. Many have ventured in, lured by the promise of the amulet's power, but few have returned. The forest is alive, and it guards its treasures fiercely. Alex gripped the hilt of his sword, determination burning in his eyes. "Tell us what we need to do," he said resolutely. "The amulet is protected by 3 trials," Mrs. Lavinia explained. "First, you'll face the maze of mirrors, where your worst fears will confront you. You must not let them sway you from your path. Next is the river of reflections, where the waters show not what is, but what could have been. It's a test of resolve and clarity. And finally, at the very heart of the forest, you'll find the glade of shadows. Here, the amulet awaits, but it's guarded by the spirits of the forest. You must prove to them the purity of your intentions." Sarah, her sorceress instincts kicking in, began to mentally prepare. She knew they would need more than just magic, they would need strategy, wit, and an unbreakable bond of trust. Mrs. Lavinia handed them a small vial filled with a luminescent liquid. "This is the light of lucidity. In your darkest moments, when all seems lost, use it. It will guide you." With a deep breath, Alex and Sarah set forth towards the haunted forest, armed with their skills, their bond, and the hope of saving Eldridge. The challenge set by Mrs. Lavinia was not just about retrieving an amulet, it was a journey of self-discovery, of facing one's fears, and of realizing the strength that comes from unity. The entrance to the cursed woods was marked by an ancient stone archway, overgrown with ivy and moss. As Alex and Sarah stepped through, the world behind them seemed to fade away, replaced by an eerie silence punctuated only by the distant hoot of an owl. The maze of mirrors. The first trial awaited them almost immediately. Before them stretched a vast labyrinth, its walls made entirely of mirrors. But these were no ordinary mirrors. They reflected not just their physical forms but their deepest fears and insecurities. Alex, looking into one, saw himself as a failed knight, ridiculed and shamed, his armor tarnished and broken. Sarah saw herself trapped in an endless void, her magic gone, her voice silenced forever. The maze seemed to twist and turn with every step they took, the reflections taunting them, trying to break their spirit. But together, they pushed forward. Sarah used her magic to mark their path, while Alex, drawing on his knight's training, kept them focused on their goal. Whenever one faltered, the other was there, offering words of encouragement and support. After what felt like hours, they emerged from the maze, their bond stronger than ever. The River of Reflections. The next challenge was a vast river, its waters dark and still. As they approached, the surface rippled, revealing not the canopy above but visions of alternate realities. Sarah saw a life where she had never discovered her magical abilities, living in monotony and regret. Alex saw a world where he had become a tyrant, using his knightly powers for personal gain. The river's currents were strong, trying to pull them into these alternate realities. But they resisted. Sarah conjured a bridge of light, while Alex defended against the river's illusions, his sword cutting through the false visions. Step by step, they crossed the river, leaving the haunting what-ifs behind. The glade of shadows. Finally, they reached the heart of the forest, a clearing bathed in moonlight. In its center stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested the amulet of Aetheria. But guarding it were the spirits of the forest, ethereal creatures made of shadow and light. The spirits were not inherently evil, but they were fiercely protective of the amulet. They challenged Alex and Sarah, testing their resolve and intentions. Waves of darkness washed over them, trying to cloud their minds and hearts. But the duo stood firm. Sarah chanted spells of protection, her voice clear and strong, while Alex's sword glowed with a radiant light, repelling the shadows. Then, in a final test, the spirits merged into a colossal entity, its form ever shifting between a roaring beast, a towering tree, and a swirling vortex. Alex and Sarah, combining their strengths, faced the entity head-on. With a powerful incantation from Sarah and a decisive strike from Alex, the entity was subdued, dissolving into a shower of sparkling lights. The spirits, now in their individual forms, nodded in approval. They recognized the purity of Alex and Sarah's intentions and allowed them to take the amulet. With the amulet of Aetheria in hand, the duo made their way out of the forest, the trials and monsters behind them. But the journey had changed them. They had faced their fears, confronted their past, and emerged stronger, ready to save Eldridge and restore balance to their world. As Alex and Sarah approached the stone pedestal, the moonlight revealed another figure standing in their way. It was Mr. Hawthorne, the town's librarian. But he was no longer the mild-mannered, bespectacled man they knew. Transformed by a costume from Mystique Masquerades, he had become the guardian of the amulet, a powerful and imposing sorcerer draped in robes of midnight blue, adorned with constellations that twinkled like real stars. His eyes, once kind and full of wisdom, now glowed with an otherworldly power. "Ah, young ones," he intoned, his voice echoing through the glade. "You've come for the amulet, but I cannot let you take it." Sarah stepped forward, her voice firm. "Mr. Hawthorne, the town is in chaos. We need the amulet to set things right." The guardian chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down their spines. "Why would I want to go back to being a mere librarian when I can wield such power? Here, in this form, I am immortal, invincible. The knowledge and magic I possess are beyond anything I ever dreamed of." Alex gripped his sword, ready for a confrontation. "We won't let you stand in our way. The people of Eldridge need us." A magical duel ensued. The Guardian, with his vast knowledge of spells and rituals, summoned elemental forces, hurling fireballs and calling down lightning. The glade was transformed into a battleground, with trees uprooted and the ground scorched. Sarah, drawing on her newfound sorceress abilities, countered his attacks, creating shields of energy and deflecting his spells. Alex, using his knight's agility, dodged the Guardian's onslaught, looking for an opening. As the battle raged on, Sarah had an idea. She remembered a spell that could break through any enchantment, but it required two magic users to cast it simultaneously. She whispered the plan to Alex, who nodded in understanding. Positioning themselves on either side of the Guardian, they began to chant in unison. The air grew thick with tension, and a vortex of energy formed around Mr. Hawthorne. He struggled, trying to break free, but the combined power of Alex and Sarah held him in place. With a final, resounding shout, they released the spell. A blinding light enveloped the Guardian, and when it faded, Mr. Hawthorne stood there, dazed and confused, his librarian attire restored. Sarah approached him gently. "It's okay, Mr. Hawthorne. You're back." He looked around, realization dawning on him. "What have I done?" he whispered, tears forming in his eyes. Alex placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It wasn't your fault. The costume's magic was too strong. But it's over now." Together, the trio approached the pedestal, and with the amulet of Aetheria in their possession, they set forth to restore Eldridge and undo the chaos that had befallen their beloved town. The moonlit glade became an arena as Alex, in his knight's armor, faced off against the transformed Mr. Hawthorne, the guardian of the amulet. Sarah, her robes flowing and eyes glowing with arcane energy, prepared to support him with her sorcery. The guardian, with a wave of his hand, summoned a wall of fire, attempting to separate Alex and Sarah. But Sarah, drawing upon her newfound powers, conjured a gust of wind, dispersing the flames. Alex, seizing the opportunity, charged forward, his sword gleaming. As Alex neared the guardian, the ground beneath him shifted, turning into a quagmire, trying to trap him in place. But with his knight's agility, Alex leaped, narrowly avoiding the trap. He swung his sword, aiming for the amulet around the guardian's neck, believing it to be the source of his power. The guardian parried with a staff of pure energy, the two weapons clashing with a sound like thunder. Sarah, meanwhile, began chanting, her hands weaving intricate patterns in the air. Arcane symbols appeared around her, glowing with a soft light. With a shout, she sent a barrage of magical missiles towards the guardian, who deflected them with a shimmering shield. The guardian retaliated, conjuring ethereal chains to bind Sarah, trying to neutralize the threat she posed. But Sarah, tapping into her sorceress instincts, turned the chains into vines, which rooted themselves harmlessly into the ground. Alex, using his knight's training, feinted to the left, drawing the guardian's attention, then quickly changed direction, aiming a blow at his side. The guardian, caught off guard, stumbled back, narrowly avoiding the strike. Realizing they needed to combine their strengths, Alex and Sarah devised a plan. Alex began a series of rapid attacks, keeping the guardian on the defensive, while Sarah prepared a powerful spell. With each swing of his sword, Alex channeled his energy, creating openings for Sarah. She, in turn, used these moments to draw upon the ambient magic in the glade, focusing it into a concentrated beam. As Alex landed a particularly forceful blow, knocking the guardian's energy staff from his hand, Sarah released her spell. A brilliant ray of light shot forth, enveloping the guardian, and for a moment, the entire glade was illuminated. When the light faded, the guardian, Mr. Hawthorne, lay on the ground, dazed but unharmed. The amulet around his neck had cracked, its magic neutralized. Alex, breathing heavily, sheathed his sword, while Sarah, her energy spent, collapsed to her knees. They had won the battle, using a combination of knightly prowess and sorcery, proving that together, they were a force to be reckoned with. With the amulet of Aetheria safely in their possession, Alex and Sarah made their way back to Mystique Masquerades. The journey back to town was eerily quiet, the once familiar streets now filled with characters from different eras and worlds, all under the spell of the enchanted costumes. As they approached the shop, they could hear the distant cries and shouts of the transformed townsfolk. Pirates brawled with cowboys, witches flew overhead on broomsticks, and a group of astronauts seemed to be trying to build a makeshift rocket out of old barrels and planks. Mrs. Lavinia, the old shopkeeper, was waiting for them at the entrance. Her eyes widened in surprise as she saw the amulet. "You've done it," she whispered, a hint of tears in her eyes. Sarah nodded, holding up the amulet. "We need to reverse the curse. Tell us what to do." Mrs. Lavinia guided them to the center of the shop, where a large, ornate mirror stood. "This mirror is the nexus of the enchantment," she explained. "By channeling the power of the amulet through it, we can reverse the transformations." Alex and Sarah stood on either side of the mirror, with Mrs. Lavinia in the center. She began to chant in an ancient language, her voice rising and falling in a haunting melody. Sarah joined in, her sorceress abilities allowing her to tap into the magic of the amulet. As the two of them chanted, Alex, drawing on his knight's resolve, focused on the memories of the townsfolk, picturing them as they once were. The amulet began to glow, emitting a soft, golden light that filled the room. The mirror's surface rippled, and one by one, the reflections of the transformed townsfolk appeared. With each chant, a burst of light would emanate from the mirror, enveloping a transformed person and restoring them to their original self. Outside the shop, the chaos began to subside. Pirates turned back into schoolteachers, witches into bakers, and astronauts into farmers. They looked around in confusion, their memories of their time as enchanted characters slowly fading. As the last of the townsfolk were restored, the mirror surface stilled, and the amulet's glow dimmed. Exhausted but triumphant, Alex, Sarah, and Mrs. Lavinia looked at each other, smiles of relief on their faces. The curse of Mystique Masquerades had been lifted, and the town of Eldridge was safe once more. Halloween would be celebrated as usual, but with a newfound appreciation for the magic and mystery of the season. And as for the shop, it remained a reminder of the adventure, its doors closed, but its legacy living on in the tales of the townsfolk. The morning after the enchantment had been lifted, the townsfolk of Eldridge gathered in the town square. The events of the previous night, though hazy for some, were fresh in the minds of many. Whispers of the chaos, the transformations, and the bravery of Alex and Sarah filled the air. At the heart of the discussions was Mystique Masquerades. The once intriguing shop had become a symbol of the dangers of unchecked magic. Parents held their children close, recounting tales of seeing their neighbors transformed into creatures and characters from their wildest imaginations. The elderly reminisced about the old legends of Eldridge, drawing parallels to the enchantments of the shop. Mayor Thompson called for a town meeting. As the bell tolled, the crowd hushed, and he stepped onto the wooden podium. "My dear residents of Eldridge," he began, "last night, we witnessed magic, both wondrous and terrifying. While we are grateful to be restored to our true selves, we must ensure that such chaos never befalls our town again." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Lavinia, the old shopkeeper of Mystique Masquerades, stood up. Her eyes, once filled with mystery, now held a deep sadness. "I never intended for any of this to happen," she said, her voice trembling. "The costumes were meant to bring joy, not terror. But I realize now the dangers they pose." She took a deep breath. "I have decided to close Mystique Masquerades permanently. The magic within its walls is too powerful, too unpredictable. I will ensure that the costumes are safely stored away, where they can harm no one." The crowd erupted in applause, their relief palpable. Sarah approached Mrs. Lavinia, offering a comforting hand. "You made the right decision," she whispered. Alex nodded in agreement. "Eldridge will always remember the magic of this Halloween, but it's time to move forward." As the days turned into weeks, the shop's windows were boarded up, and its sign was taken down. The building, though empty, stood as a silent reminder of the Halloween that Eldridge would never forget. Children would pass by, their eyes wide with curiosity, asking their parents about the mysterious shop. And as the years went by, Mystique Masquerades became a legend, a tale told on chilly October nights, a story of magic, adventure, and the importance of understanding the power one wields. As the last remnants of autumn leaves swirled around the now silent streets of Eldridge, Alex and Sarah found themselves on a quiet hill overlooking the town. The setting sun cast a golden hue, and the distant laughter of children trying on their Halloween costumes echoed softly. Sarah, her fingers playing with a fallen maple leaf, broke the silence. "You know, Halloween has always been about pretending, about becoming someone or something else for a night. But after everything that's happened, I've realized that there's a fine line between harmless fun and losing oneself completely." Alex nodded, his gaze distant. "It's true. Mystique Masquerades showed us the allure of becoming someone else, of escaping our realities. But it also showed us the dangers. I saw townsfolk, friends, even family, completely lose themselves, forgetting who they truly were." Sarah looked at him, her eyes reflecting the twilight. "It's a reminder, isn't it? That while it's okay to dream, to pretend, we should never lose sight of our true selves. Halloween is a celebration of imagination, but it's also a celebration of our identities, of embracing who we are." Alex smiled, taking her hand. "Exactly. And while costumes can be fun, it's the person beneath that truly matters. We should celebrate our uniqueness, our stories, our quirks. Because in the end, that's what makes us special." The two sat in silence for a while, the weight of their adventure still fresh in their minds. As the first stars began to twinkle, they made their way back to town, their hearts filled with a newfound appreciation for the magic of Halloween and the importance of staying true to oneself. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, whispers began to circulate around Eldridge. Travelers passing through brought tales of a new costume shop that had opened in a neighboring town. Descriptions of its enchanting window displays and the allure of its incredibly realistic costumes sounded eerily familiar. One evening, at the local diner, a trucker recounted his visit to the shop. "It's called Enchanted Evenings," he said, sipping his coffee. "Never seen anything like it." The shopkeeper, an old lady with a twinkle in her eye, said it was her grand opening. Sarah and Alex exchanged a knowing glance. They remembered that twinkle all too well. It was Mrs. Lavinia. While Eldridge had moved on from the events of that fateful Halloween, it seemed that Mrs. Lavinia wasn't quite ready to give up on her magical endeavors. Perhaps she believed that in a different town, with a fresh start, things would be different. Or maybe, just maybe, she felt that the world needed a touch of magic, no matter the cost. Whatever her reasons, one thing was clear: the legend of Mystique Masquerades was far from over. And as Halloween approached once again, another town would soon discover the wonders and perils of truly becoming someone else.